Chapter 8, we're going to take our study of harmony to the next level. We're going to talk about added tones, we're going to talk about some extended chords, that means chords where we're extending beyond just the triad, and then we're going to finish up talking about chord voicing, a very cool subject. But we're going to start with added tones. To me, this whole topic is kind of like, if you think of a painter studying color, or you think about a master chef studying about spices that you can add to your dishes, that's kind of like what added tones are. And we're going to start with the most common added tone, and that's the added second. Check this out. I'm going to take my C major triad, place we always start, right there, and we're going to add a second to that major triad. Now the second is the D. So here's the major triad, here's the added second. Now, in pop music today, adding the second to the triad is so common. It's almost like adding salt to your French fries. You know what I mean? You get so used to it, and you hear it all the time. For instance, well, anybody that's a follower of the band Steely Dan, they actually had a name for this chord. They called it mu major, and it showed up in their music all the time. Now, interesting thing about it, you don't even need to have the third. Sometimes you can just have the second without the third, and your brain still kind of puts the third in there. The interesting thing about this structure, leave out the third, is that it gives you a much starker, more modern feeling. For instance, you know, we've been fed a steady diet of triads ever since, you know, the 1600s. All of our music is built on triads. So when I'm doing a pop arrangement, anything I can do to get away from triads is a generally good thing. So this is a structure that you want to kind of keep an eye out for. Anytime you can voice a chord this way with seconds and fourths, or look what happens if you bring the root up an octave. Now you've just got a stack of fourths instead of a stack of thirds. Those kind of structures are definitely going to make your music sound a little bit more modern. So we're going to talk about voicing in a second, but when you get to voicing, just think that way. Try to keep an eye out for ways you can voice things in seconds and fourths rather than thirds. Now, this C add 2 chord, a lot of times we get questions in seminars about, well, what's the difference between a C2 and a C add 2 and a C add 9? Because as you can see, 9 is the same as 2. It's just adding a D to the chord. Or a C9. Now, this is kind of a confusing thing. This is where the chord symbol system does sort of break down a little bit. You know, when you're reading words, there's some words that we used to call sight words that you just have to, doesn't really fit the rules of spelling. You just kind of have to look at that and remember, like the word rhythm. The chord symbols start to go that way a little bit. And the one of those that is a little bit odd is the C9. All the rest of those are pretty similar. Like if I'm looking at a chord chart, I walk into a session, if I see a C2, that's what I'm looking at. C add 2, really just the same thing. You're taking a C and you're adding the 2. Now when you say C add 9, that tells me something slightly different. When you say C9, basically you're implying that all of the thirds required to get up to the 9 are in that chord. Or when you say C add 9, that kind of tells me that, okay, maybe we're not including all of those thirds to get up there. We're just adding that 9th on top. And knowing that in voicing I have the privilege of putting that 9 wherever I want to, it pretty much is the same as a C2, right? Now C9 by itself, that's a different animal. Because when you have C9, you are implying the fact that we're building up in thirds, so there's got to be a 7th in there. Now this is one of those sight words. It's like a sight symbol. C9 is not C major 9. Okay? C9, remember we talked about the dominant 7th chord, which is the major with the minor 7th? C9 is that same thing. It's really C dominant 9, which means it has this 7th, major triad, minor 7th, and there's your 9. So that's the one chord symbol of all those. It's definitely a different animal because this function, you know, pulls you like an authentic cadence to a new destination. So that's slightly different. But all the rest of those, C, C add 2, C add 9, those are all basically the same thing. Mu major, if you're a Steely Dan fan. It's interesting, as we're talking about added tones, how much contemporary guitar playing has added to this whole subject. It's interesting because a lot of people will say, you know, you talk about how you can play all these modern worship songs with simple triads, and yet I'm listening to the recording and I'm hearing all of this other stuff in and around those triads. Well, this is all the added tones. That's exactly what you're hearing. You're hearing the basic triad plus all these added tones. And just the science and the physics of guitar has contributed a lot to that. Let me show you what I mean. If you take the open strings of a guitar like this, and let's just say the two open strings at the top, the B and the E, let's just take those two. Now you think of Paul Balash's song, Open the Eyes of My Heart. This is a situation where a guitar player might just decide, well, you know what, I'm just going to leave those strings open. I'm not going to put any fingers on them, and I'm just going to let them ring through all the chords I'm going to play. And just see what added tones develop from that. So the first chord is E, open the eyes. Obviously those are both members of the E triad, so that's no big deal. And you go to the next chord, which is a B, open the eyes of my heart. Well, the B's already in there, but the E is kind of a foreign animal to the B chord. It crashes against the third, but you know, that crash is kind of a cool thing. You see what I'm saying? The same two open strings, let's go on to the next chord. I want to see you, an A chord. Well, the E's already in there, but now the B is that added second. It's that added second we just talked about. I want to see you. Some people will do this. So now you got a D chord with those open two strings. That's like a sixth and a ninth added to the D. So just listen as I do this. So get that open B and E string in your mind. So open the eyes of my heart, Lord. I want to see you. I want to see you. So you can see, just by letting those strings ring and not bothering to finger them, as you move through the chord progression, you're you know, sort of accidentally creating all kinds of cool added chords, added tones, and chords that are much richer than just the triads that are on the page. Follow what I'm saying? I mean, a lot of times as a keyboard player, I actually look at guitar and I look at what guitar players are doing to get ideas that I can then incorporate into keyboard playing. And these days, a lot of the sound you hear in these modern worship songs are a really rich palette of added tones that are coming from guitar players, sometimes just letting strings ring and just seeing what sounds develop. And if it sounds great, then, you know, make it part of the song.